I run a consulting firm in Vienna, and last month we hosted a delegation from Texas. Their project manager walked into our boardroom, saw our CEO's nameplate reading, Professor Dr. Wolfgang Hartmann, stuck out his hand and said, "Hey Wolfgang, great to meet you, buddy." Our CEO just stared at him. I'm talking the kind of stare that could freeze the Danube. The Texan kept going. "So Wolf, you got those quarterly reports ready or what?" He shortened a professor's name to Wolf. "In Austria, where my boss spent 12 years earning 2 doctorates and a full professorship." The American noticed the silence and said, "What?" "I'm being friendly. Back home everyone's on a first-name basis. It's called not being stuck up." He genuinely believed that 300 years of Austrian academic hierarchy was us being rude to him. This lasted 4 days. Every meeting started with "Morning Wolf," while the rest of us called him "Herr Professor Doctor." On day 3 the American pulled me aside and asked if our CEO had a problem with Americans. I said no, he has a problem with you treating him like your college roommate. The guy looked confused and said, "But I'm showing him I see him as an equal. That's respectful where I'm from." That's when I realized they don't ignore our hierarchy on purpose. They genuinely think their way is the more respectful system. The American spent the whole week convinced he was being admirably egalitarian while my boss drafted termination clauses for the contract. I manage a government ministry office in Brussels, and we had an intern from California. First day, she walked past the Director General in the hallway and said, "Oh hey, you must be Mark. I'm Ashley, the new intern. Super excited to work with you." She used his first name. An intern. To a Director General. The Director General is addressed as Monsieur le Directeur General by people who've worked here 20 years. Ashley kept going. "So Mark, I had some ideas about the refugee integration program. Can we grab coffee and brainstorm?" The Director General just said, "You may schedule an appointment through my secretary." 3 days later Ashley sent an email that started, "Hey Mark." Forwarded it to the entire senior staff by accident. My colleague had to pull her aside and explain that she'd committed what's essentially a professional crime in Belgian administration. Ashley said, "But why? He's just another person. Titles are medieval." She said medieval like it was a diagnosis. When we explained the system she said, "That's so hierarchical though. In America we flatten the org chart so everyone feels valued." The Director General later told me, "I do not need an intern to make me feel valued. I need an intern who knows what Monsieur le Directeur General means." Ashley lasted 2 weeks before requesting a transfer because she felt the office was weirdly formal and cold. My uncle is a senior surgeon at a hospital in Lyon, and last year they hired an American resident. The resident was technically skilled but had one catastrophic flaw. He called my uncle Jean-Pierre. Not Dr. Moreau. Not Monsieur. Jean-Pierre. Like they were teammates. In surgery he'd say, "Jean-Pierre, can you check this incision?" My uncle corrected him twice. The resident said, "But I thought French people were friendly. I'm trying to break down barriers." The barriers he was breaking down took my uncle 18 years to build. In France you don't call a senior surgeon by his first name until he's basically invited you to his daughter's wedding. The American said he'd learned that flat hierarchies improve communication in medical settings. He cited some Stanford study. My uncle said, "This is not Stanford. This is France. And I am not Jean-Pierre to you." The resident looked hurt and said, "I'm just trying to treat you like a colleague." My uncle said, "You are not my colleague. You are my subordinate. There is a structure." The resident transferred to a hospital in Amsterdam 3 months later where apparently everyone was fine with first names. My uncle still tells this story at dinner parties as evidence that Americans fundamentally don't understand that titles represent accumulated expertise and institutional standing. I work at a family hotel in Baden-Baden that's been operating since 1887. We had American guests last summer who called our head concierge Klaus by his first name within 10 minutes of checking in. This man has worked here 42 years. His formal title is Herr Oberkellnermeister. Guests typically address him as Herr Weber. These Americans said, "Thanks, Klaus," every time he helped them. At dinner one night they asked Klaus to sit with them because they wanted to hear his stories. In Germany, they asked the head concierge to dine with guests. Klaus politely declined. They said, "Come on, Klaus, don't be shy," like he was nervous instead of following 140 years of hotel protocol. The next day they complained to management that Klaus seemed standoffish and unfriendly. When I explained that he was being appropriately professional, they said, "But we're on vacation. Everyone should relax." They couldn't grasp that Klaus relaxing would mean Klaus losing his job. The husband told me, "Back in Colorado everyone's just folks. No one cares about fancy titles." I wanted to tell him that here, the fancy title is how you know someone spent 4 decades perfecting their profession. They checked out 2 days early because the vibe was too stiff. Klaus said it was the most uncomfortable week of his career because they kept trying to turn formal service interactions into casual friendship. My sister works in Parliament in Stockholm, and they assigned her an American liaison officer for a trade negotiation. The American showed up to the opening session and greeted our Minister of Trade by saying, "Hi Anna, I'm Brad." Used the minister's first name. Immediately, our minister is addressed as Minister Lindqvist or Fru Minister. The American had done zero research on Swedish governmental protocol. He thought because Sweden is known for being egalitarian, that means everyone's on a first-name basis in formal settings. That's not how it works. We're egalitarian in social policy, not in how you address a government minister. During the negotiation, Brad kept saying things like, "So Anna, here's what we're thinking." Every single time, everyone in the room tensed up. After the meeting, my sister's boss said, "Can someone please explain to the American how to address a minister?" My sister emailed Brad. He wrote back, "But I thought Swedes were informal? I'm confused." She explained that titles are still used in professional government settings. Brad replied, "Seems outdated for such a progressive country." He genuinely thought he was identifying a flaw in Swedish culture. The rest of the negotiation he used Minister Lindqvist, but you could tell he felt like he was playing pretend in some costume drama. The minister later told my sister, "Americans believe their informality is proof of their modernity. They do not realize it often reads as proof of their inexperience." I'm a waiter at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Copenhagen, and last month we served a table of American tourists. The head chef came out to greet them. Our head chef has 2 Michelin stars and has been written up in every major food publication. His name is Henrik Mortensen. The American said, "Hey Henrik, loved the venison, buddy." They called Chef Mortensen buddy. In Denmark you typically say, "Thank you, chef," or "compliments to Chef Mortensen." You don't treat a 2-star Michelin chef like your grilling neighbor. Chef Mortensen smiled tightly and returned to the kitchen. Later one of the Americans flagged me down and said, "Can you tell Henrik we'd love to meet him again? He seemed cool." I said, "You mean Chef Mortensen?" They said, "Yeah, Henrik. Is he around?" I explained that using his first name was considered overly familiar. The woman at the table said, "But he introduced himself as Henrik." He had not. He'd said, "Good evening, I am Chef Mortensen." Americans have this ability to hear a formal introduction and translate it in their heads to something casual. The husband said, "We're just being friendly. What's the problem?" The problem is that you're in Denmark treating a decorated chef like your buddy Henrik from book club. They left a big tip but also a comment card saying the staff was weirdly formal for such a modern restaurant. My cousin manages a cafe in Lisbon and we hired an American barista last year. Nice enough person but couldn't understand Portuguese coffee culture. In Portugal, regular customers address the owner as Senor followed by the family name. This American called my cousin Ricardo from day one. My cousin is Senor Tavares to customers. The American said, but we work together. Seems weird to be so formal. I explained that in Portugal, formality shows respect, especially from younger staff to ownership. The American said, in Seattle where I trained, everyone called the owner by her first name. Even customers. That's Seattle. This is Lisbon. We've had the same elderly customers for 30 years who still call my cousin Senor Tavares. The American tried to get them to loosen up by saying things like, "Oh, you mean Ricardo?" gesturing at my cousin. The customers looked horrified. One regular pulled me aside and asked if we'd hired someone with a mental condition because why else would a young employee show such disrespect? The American eventually quit after 3 months, saying the cafe had weird old-school vibes. My cousin said hiring her was proof that American informality doesn't translate, it just creates constant low-level social tension where locals think you're being rude and you think they're being uptight. I bartended at a wine bar in Bordeaux, and we had American customers who wanted to discuss wine with our sommelier. Our sommelier's name is Madame Chevalier. She has 30 years experience and multiple certifications. The Americans waved her over and said, "Hey, so we were hoping you could recommend something." Didn't use her name. Didn't use her title. Just hey. When she introduced herself as Madame Chevalier, they immediately said, "Great, thanks so much madam." Dropped the last name. Just Madame, like it was her first name. In French, Madame without the surname is how you'd address a stranger whose name you don't know. It's not how you address a sommelier who just introduced herself with her full title. She recommended a wine. The American guy said, "Awesome, thanks madam," again. Never once said Chevalier. My colleague whispered to me, "Do they think madam is her name?" The Americans seemed to think they were being polite by using the title madam. They had no idea that dropping the surname completely changed the meaning from respectful to vaguely dismissive. When they left, Madame Chevalier said, "Americans use our titles like accessories. They wear them wrong and think they are dressed appropriately. It's true. They know enough to say madam, but not enough to know that madam alone is functionally useless without the family name." I worked the breakfast service at a hotel in Prague, and we had American guests who insisted on calling our head server Pavel. His name is Mr. Novotny, and he's been serving breakfast here for 23 years. They'd say "Morning, Pavel," every day. He'd say "Good morning" back, but you could see his jaw tighten. On day 4, the American wife said, "Pavel, you're the best," and tried to hug him. He stepped back. She looked hurt. Her husband said, "What's wrong?" Mr. Novotny said, "I am Mr. Novotny." The American said, "Oh sorry, we didn't mean anything by it." But they kept calling him Pavel for the rest of their stay. They literally could not stop themselves. My manager explained later that Americans have this thing where once they learn someone's first name, their brain refuses to use the formal name. It's like their informality is a reflex they can't control. The Americans left a review saying Mr. Novotny was professional but not very warm. He'd been perfectly warm. He just refused to participate in their fantasy that a hotel server and a guest are old friends. The review said, "Wish Pavel had been more relaxed." They couldn't even use his correct name in a public review. Mr. Novotny read it and said, "Americans confuse warmth with familiarity. They are not the same thing." I'm a train conductor on the Deutsche Bahn, and last month I had to correct an American passenger for sitting in first class with a second-class ticket. When I asked to see her ticket, she said, "Oh sorry, I didn't realize." Then she looked at my uniform and said, "Hey, what's your name?" Like we were about to become friends. I told her, "I am the conductor." She said, "Yeah, but what's your name?" I said, You may call me Herr Schaefer. She looked at my colleague like I was joking. She said, okay, Herr Schaefer, can you help me find my actual seat? She said it like she was humoring a child. My colleague showed her to second class. 5 minutes later she came back and said, hey, Herr Schaefer, is there a bathroom on this car? Just kept using the title like it was my quirky nickname. At the end of the journey she said, thanks Herr Schaefer, you were great. She had learned nothing. She thought she was respecting my preference for formality. She didn't understand that Herr Schaefer wasn't a preference, it was the only appropriate way to address a uniformed railway official in Germany. My colleague said, Americans think using titles is like saying please. A nice thing you do sometimes. They don't understand it's the entire structure of the language. The American probably went home and told people she met a conductor in Germany who wanted to be called Herr Schaefer and wasn't that cute. My brother drives a tour bus in Edinburgh, and last year he had a group from Arizona. In Scotland, you address the driver as driver, or you use Mr. and the surname if you learn it. These Americans started calling my brother Angus by the second day. He'd corrected them once. They said, oh, we're just being friendly. Then they started shortening it to Gus. My brother's name is Angus MacLeod and he is addressed as Mr. MacLeod or driver by passengers. These Americans made up a nickname. On day 4 one of them said, hey Gus, can we stop for photos? My brother said, I am Mr. MacLeod. The American laughed and said, okay Mr. MacLeod, can we stop? Like he was going along with a bit. They never understood that he was serious. At the end of the tour they tipped him and one said, thanks Gus. You're a legend. My brother told me, they genuinely thought they were complimenting me by treating me like a mate. They couldn't comprehend that a professional driver expects formal address. The Americans left a 5-star review calling him Gus the bus driver and saying how down-to-earth he was. My brother read it and said, I was not down to earth. I was trying to maintain professional boundaries and they bulldozed them. I manage a taxi service in Oslo and we hired an American dispatcher last year. In Norway, drivers are addressed formally by dispatch. You say Driver Hansen or Mr. Hansen. This American started using first names immediately. Hey Bjorn, you've got a pickup at the airport. The drivers complained within a week. They said it was disrespectful. I explained to the American that using first names undermines the professional relationship. He said, but it's friendlier. Makes everyone feel like a team. I said, they do not want to feel like a team. They want to feel like professionals being professionally coordinated. The American said, that's so rigid. In Portland where I'm from, everyone's on a first name basis. It makes work more fun. This is not Portland. The drivers are twice his age and expect formal address. One driver, Mr. Larson, finally told him directly, you will call me Driver Larson or Mr. Larson. The American said, whoa, okay, no problem. But you could tell he thought Mr. Larson was being unreasonable. He lasted 4 months before quitting because he said the work environment was cold and unwelcoming. The drivers said the work environment was fine until someone showed up who didn't understand that professional respect is demonstrated through formal address, not through forced casualness. I work at a language school in Zurich, and we had an American teacher who could not grasp Swiss-German formality. In Switzerland, you address students' parents as Herr or Frau with the family name. This American sent emails that started, Hi Stefan and Claudia. Used the parents' first names. Like they were colleagues. The parents complained. One father came to the office and said, I am Herr Zimmermann. I am not Stefan to my child's teacher. I had to sit down with the American and explain the system. She said, but I'm trying to build relationships with the families. First names make it more personal. I said, personal is not the goal. Respectful is the goal. She said, this is so confusing. How are kids supposed to learn egalitarian values if adults are obsessed with titles? I explained that Swiss children learn titles precisely so they understand social structures and can navigate them appropriately. She said, "That sounds like teaching hierarchy, not equality." Yes, exactly. We are teaching hierarchy. Because hierarchy exists and knowing how to operate within it is a life skill. The American teacher requested a transfer to the Netherlands after one semester because she couldn't connect with Swiss families. The families were fine. She just refused to address them correctly. I train corporate executives on cross-cultural communication, and last month I worked with an American CEO preparing for meetings in Munich. I spent 3 hours explaining German business formality. I showed him how to address a doctor, a professor doctor, a department head. I wrote it all down. First meeting in Munich, he walked in and said, "Hey everyone, I'm Mike." First name basis within seconds. With executives who'd spent decades earning their titles. He'd forgotten everything. Or he'd understood it intellectually but couldn't override his cultural programming when the moment came. After the meeting, his German counterpart told me, "Your client is very smart but has no sense of occasion. He treated our boardroom like a barbecue." That's the whole issue. Americans don't ignore European hierarchy because they're ignorant or rude. They ignore it because their entire culture has trained them that informality signals respect, equality, and modern thinking. They genuinely believe that everyone in Europe is secretly waiting for an American to come liberate them from their outdated titles. They cannot fathom that we like our titles, that we earned them, that they mean something. And the Americans who do learn to use titles correctly? They always do it with this slight air of, "I'm playing along with your formal game," instead of, "I'm showing respect the way respect is shown here." Some gaps don't close with explanation. They're built into the culture. Next week I'm training a group from Texas. I've already started drinking,